had a friend who said to me, I know we're destroying the Constitution. I know we're doing that, but it's worth it to get Trump. But it's not worth destroying a 200 and something year legacy of the longest serving constitution in the history of humankind in order to prevent a person from running for president.
You've always gone to the letter of the law because you believe in the letter of the law. You believe in the First Amendment because you think that's what all freedom is based on, the Constitution is based on. You're saying ultimately you can pay someone to be quiet. There wasn't a crime here, right?
Has anyone in the history of the world ever been prosecuted for not truthfully disclosing the payment to hush funds? It is such a stretch that in 60 years of doing this, I've never seen anything like it. And I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm a Democrat. I want to vote against Trump for the third time, but I don't want a local DA to interfere with my right to vote against him and other people's rights to vote for him.
It's hard for me to believe because I'm born in America. I spent half my life there. I'm watching that from over here. And meanwhile, the world points their fingers at the injustices in China and in Russia and what's going on here. And then you look back to the United States of America and you see the law and justice being co-opted for political reasons in such a clear way. It's just hard to believe it's gone this far.
The president of El Salvador recently wrote a tweet in which he said, how can you lecture us about democracy when you're prosecuting on such a thin case? Lavrenti Beria, the head of the KGB, said to Stalin, show me the man and I'll find you the crime.
Are we going into a communist state? Are we going to a socialist system somehow?
I think we're going into an intolerant system where we have free speech for me, but not for thee, due process for me, but not for thee. We shouldn't be targeting people like that. That's extremely dangerous. Today it's Trump, tomorrow it's a Democrat, the day after tomorrow it's your friend, and then it's you. The reasons behind free speech are to protect the most outrageous speech. In my personal life, I hate criminals, I hate, racists, but I have a job to do.
Alan, you're 84 years old and you're still mixing it up. How do you do it? What gets you up in the morning?
People say I'm the last liberal standing, that everybody else has moved to the extreme right or the extreme left. My goal is to continue to fight this good fight. I was born to be a fighter. I don't make friends doing it because the people on the right hate me because I'm not voting for Trump. The people on the left hate me because I'm defending Trump. Any idea you put forward, I'm going to challenge. And that's what I did for 50 years teaching, and I loved it.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Alan Dershowitz, the lawyer, author, and political commentator. You are one of the most recognized and sought-after lawyers in the world and have spent much of your career looking after high-profile clients, including OJ Simpson, Jeffrey Epstein, Mike Tyson, Julian Assange, and of course, Donald Trump. You were the youngest full professor in Harvard Law School history at the age of 28 and spent 46 years teaching while also maintaining your legal practice in both criminal and civil law. You've written over 40 books, including your bestsellers, Chutzpah, The Case for Israel, and your autobiography, Taking the Stand, My Life in the Law. Your latest book, Get Trump, The Threat to Civil Liberties, Due Process, and Our Constitutional Rule of Law, explores the lengths former President Trump's opponents will go to stop him from running in 2024. Alan, you believe that the very foundations of liberty, from due process and the right to counsel all the way to free speech, are under threat and that justice must be equally applicable to all. Alan, welcome back to London Real.
Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be on with you.
Great to have you here. Trump has called this legal battle a political witch hunt, an attempt to hurt his candidacy. You wrote a book about it. What do you see happening here, and even the events this week with 34 indictments being handed down on Tuesday?
I've been doing this 60 years. I've never heard of a case where a prosecutor ran for office on the promise to get somebody particular. And the title of the book, Get Trump, I didn't make that up. It comes from the campaign pledges of the district attorney and the attorney general of New York. It should be illegal. It should be unethical for any prosecutor to run on a campaign of getting somebody. And what Bragg did, he's the DA, he ran and he won. And then he rummaged through all the statute books and he said, there's nothing here. I can't prosecute him. And so several of his staff members quit. The New York Times reported there was enormous pressure on him. So he went back and he checked again. And he made up a misdemeanor and then he stapled it to a made up felony. And 1 and 1 equals 11, according to him. It's really 0 plus 0 equals 0. They came up with nothing. Let me explain to you what the theory of the misdemeanor is to start. The theory of the misdemeanor is when a person pays $130,000 to make sure that the person who's accusing him of adultery doesn't ever go public. When he pays that $130,000 hush money, he is then obligated to make that payment public on his corporate forms. And so the world will know why he paid the $130,000 hush bond. Has anyone in the history of the world ever been prosecuted for not truthfully disclosing the payment of hush funds? You know, from the time Alexander Hamilton, one of our founding fathers, paid hush money more than $130,000 by the standards of the day to make sure Mrs. Reynolds didn't disclose their adulterous affairs, no one has ever required somebody to then go on the public record and disclose it. That's the bottom line of the misdemeanor charge brought by Bragg. And then he turns it into a felony by saying, aha, but the real purpose, he tried to hide taxes. It would have involved maybe 1 hour of work by Donald Trump to earn the money to pay the few $1,000s in taxes. Moreover, there's no argument that he ever filed a false tax return. They say in his mind, when he wrote down that they were legal expenses, he intended to take deductions, and that would have been unlawful. It is such a stretch that in 60 years of doing this, I've never seen anything like it. And I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm a Democrat. I want to vote against Trump for the third time, but I don't want a local DA to interfere with my right to vote against him and other people's rights to vote for him.
Yeah, and Alan, you've always gone to the letter of the law, regardless of the client, regardless of the charges.
Right.
Because you believe in the letter of the law. You believe in the First Amendment. You spent your whole life trying to defend that because you think that's what all freedom is based on, the Constitution is based on. You know, they are throwing out these details of the salacious affair, the porn star, and they're trumping this up in a PR campaign. And that's what gets people's attention. And that's probably what's given this some gravitas with the public. But you're saying ultimately the law doesn't care about that. You can pay someone to be quiet. There wasn't a crime here, right?
No, in fact, there was a crime. The crime was by Stormy Daniels saying through her lawyer to Trump's lawyers, if you don't pay hush money, we will go public. That's called extortion. Now, the defense to that is, no. She didn't say she would go public. She said she would file a lawsuit, which would be made public. But if the threat was that she'd file a lawsuit, then the payment to her was a legal expense. And there was nothing wrong with what he wrote on his corporate forms. So one way or another, they just don't have a crime, but it sounds like a crime because it's payment of hush money. Wow, that doesn't sound right. It's putting a false statement on a form. That doesn't sound right. But when you look at the law, it may be wrong, but it's not unlawful.
Right. And there's been a lot made that, you know, never has a presidential candidate or a former president been indicted before, I think, in the history, or maybe not in a long time. Is that is more of a precedent as opposed to any legal issue? Can you speak on that?
No, there's no legal issue here. A president is not above the law. He can be indicted. Nixon was close to being indicted had he not been pardoned. And the former Vice President Aaron Burr was, in fact, indicted and prosecuted for treason. He was a vice president. After he left office, he was never prosecuted for killing Alexander Hamilton, which he probably should have been. But the issue is not a former president. The issue is the current candidate for president against the leader of the party, which has now prosecuted him. You know, the president of El Salvador recently wrote a tweet in which he said, how can you lecture us in South and Central America about democracy when you're prosecuting on such a thin case the man who's running against the incumbent president, the leader of your party? I mean, the first rule that should be changed is no prosecutor should ever be allowed to run on a campaign to get someone. It would be unheard of in England, first of all, because you're smarter than we are. We have elected prosecutors, which is dumb as could be. You have civil servants, director of public prosecutions, people who are out of politics. When you have elected prosecutors, it's an invitation to partisan weaponization. So please don't borrow the worst parts of our system. Make sure your prosecutors remain, above and beyond politics.
I must say, Alan, it's hard for me to believe because I'm born in America. I spent, half my life there. I'm watching that from over here. And meanwhile, the world points their fingers at the injustices in China and in Russia and what's going on here. And then you look back to the United States of America and you see the law and justice being co-opted for political reasons in such a clear way. It's just hard to believe it's gone this far.
It is. Robert Jackson, who was our chief prosecutor at Nuremberg and, of course, knew the Soviet system very well, famously said any prosecutor can rummage through all the statutes and regulations and find something to pin on somebody who they really are out to get. And, of course, infamously, Lavrentiy Beria, the head of the KGB, said to Stalin, show me the man and I'll find you the crime. This is typical of repressive regimes, first targeting the individual and then searching for the crimes. Let me give you an example from my own life. When I was like 23 years old, I went down south as a monitor in the civil rights movement. We were trained at Howard University. The first thing we were told to do was don't spit on the sidewalk. Don't put out your cigarettes on the sidewalk because they are targeting you as a civil rights worker. They will come after you. They'll indict you for the felony of destroying government property, and you will be convicted by an all-white Jim Crow jury. We knew that, and we never did anything illegal, yet some of the civil rights workers were prosecuted, Martin Luther King, and went to prison. He had no chance in front of an all-white jury, and I don't think Donald Trump, I don't want to compare the Jim Crow South to New York, but I don't believe that Donald Trump has any chance of getting acquitted in front of a Manhattan jury. 87% or so of Manhattanites voted against Trump. Most of them voted for Bragg, who campaigned that he'll get Trump. So can you imagine having people serving on the jury who have voted for the candidate who promised to get Trump? Now they're in a position where they can get Trump. You cannot have justice that way.
And you've experienced this same, form of ostracization, I guess that's what you call it. When you defended him in 2020, I think against the impeachment, you found that all of your lifelong friends now didn't want to talk to you. So what that's like.
Larry David, the famous comedian, I saw him on Martha's Vineyard. I helped his daughter get into college. He would come to our home for dinner and for working out in my gym. I say hello to him. He walks away. I say, Larry, can we talk? He said, no, you're disgusting. You're revolting. You're out. You're disgusting. I can't talk to you. Because I didn't vote for Trump. I defended him on constitutional grounds against an unconstitutional impeachment. But the passions are so high. Caroline Kennedy, the daughter of the President of the United States, was seated next to me at a dinner party. And she said, if I knew you had been invited, I would never have come to this party. I represented her uncle, Ted Kennedy, at Chappaquiddick. I worked with her other uncle, Robert Kennedy. I voted for her father, John Kennedy. And she can't sit next to me at a dinner party because she doesn't like the person who I defended. It's just, again, it's a return to McCarthyism of the 1950s. It's just this time it's coming from the hard left instead of the hard right. Just
as an aside, Alan, why do they hate Donald Trump so much?
Well, he's a guy who provokes hatred. I understand that. He's a name caller. He divides people. The reason I'm not voting for him is because of these issues. I voted for Biden in the hope that he would bring the country together, bring us closer to the center, unite us. I don't think he's done such a great job doing that. But Donald Trump does provoke this kind of hatred. But that doesn't mean that we should distort the legal system to get him. I had a friend who said to me, I know we're destroying the Constitution. I know we're doing that, but it's worth it to get Trump. But it's not. It's not worth destroying a 200 and something year legacy of the longest constitution, longest serving constitution in the history of humankind, in order to prevent a person from running for president. It does much more harm, and that's the thesis of my book, Get Trump. It does much more harm, enduring harm, to destroy our constitutional values than to have somebody in office for 4 more years who we might not agree with.
Are you surprised to see people with PhDs, college professors, Democrats on the left that say, I don't care if we break the law, it's okay to get him out of office. I don't care if we suppress the Biden laptop story and, completely, again, subvert the law, as long as it's to get him out of office. Are you surprised sometimes? Because you would think that these people could have a logical, rational argument, people that understand what democracy is all about. Does that surprise you?
Not at all. Remember, who are the people who brought Stalin to power? They were young students at St. Petersburg University. Who were the people who brought Hitler to power? The students and the faculty in Munich. Young people, radical leftists, professors have often been in the forefront of tyrannical movements. And now I see it on colleges and universities. Stanford University, radical students prevented a judge from speaking. Yale University, Georgetown University. Here's a challenge to Harvard University. I taught there 50 years. I think if I got invited back to speak at Harvard Law School or Harvard University, there would be efforts to stop me from speaking just because I defended Donald Trump. So it's the young people, and that's why it's even more dangerous than McCarthyism. McCarthyism was a throwback to the past. This Get Trump movement tells us about the future, tells us about who will be our judges and our congresspeople and our presidents 10, 20 years from now. That's what's so worrisome. That
is worrisome. So project out 50 years, you and I might not be here, but are we going into a communist state? Are we going to a socialist system somehow?
I think we're going into an intolerant system where we have free speech for me, but not for thee, due process for me, but not for thee. It's not only this, it's the Me Too movement where the argument is if you've been accused, you must be guilty. It's efforts at universities to suppress professors who express different views. There's a case going on at the University of Pennsylvania now where a female professor has expressed some racial views that are clearly controversial, and they're trying to fire her. I think we're moving toward an intolerant world, away from liberalism. I'm a proud liberal. People on the left attack liberalism. No, you shouldn't attack liberalism. You attack radicalism. Liberals and conservatives have in common a desire to have dialogue, to create tolerance, to make room for differences between us. Look, if I were living in Britain, I'd probably vote conservative because the Conservative Party in Britain, favors climate control, is in favor of gay marriage and a woman's right to choose. In America, the Republican Party is against a lot of these libertarian individual concepts. So it's so important that whether you're a conservative or a liberal, you should be a libertarian. You should look for constraints and controls on big government's efforts to try to prevent people from losing their civil liberties and human rights. That's why I think we have to move to the center. I think Britain has led the way in some ways. It rejected the hard left in the last few elections, and it moved its Conservative Party, more to the center than the American comparable party. So I'm hoping that the Republican Party in the United States will emulate the Conservative Party in England, but it's not happening because the Republican Party in the United States is today largely dominated by evangelical right-wing people who want to impose their religious views on the rest of America.
Yeah, well, also, oftentimes in Britain, we're about 5 years behind what's happening in America. So
please don't borrow from us. Please, we need to borrow from you.
I know. I hope it goes the other way, but it rarely does. Alan, what happens next? So 34 indictments against Trump. He's gone down, been fingerprinted, et cetera. We've got an election coming up next year. You suggested that he get a fair trial in Staten Island and better pizza as well. But how does this play out? And then how does it affect an election? And can a sitting president be under indictment?
Sitting president can be under indictment. The prime minister of Israel is under indictment today as we speak. Under the United States Constitution, even a person in prison can be the president of the United States. Eugene V. Debs ran from prison, got 1 million votes back in the day, 100 years ago. He's not going to prison, but he will campaign under a cloud. In my book, Get Trump, I go through all 4 of the charges that are being investigated against him. And, there are charges that could lead to his indictment in Fulton County, Georgia, in the District of Columbia, and in Palm Beach, Florida. So it's possible he will have 4 charges against him. The weakest is the New York case. And the surprising thing is that it went first. What is not surprising in that respect is that there was an agreement to put off the next hearing until December. In 60 years of doing this, I have never seen a case where a person gets indicted in April and the next appearance in court is not for, 8 months, 9 months? That's unheard of. And maybe that's just to give an opportunity to the other investigations to go forward. So when he's tried in New York, he will be under more than one indictment. That's speculation, but I can't understand the long delay. It's a relatively simple case.
Alan, Elon Musk tweeted right when the indictment happened that the Democrats just won the election for Trump. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you think?
I think they won. I think Democrats helped Trump get nominated by the Republicans. I think he'll get nominated. A lot of Democrats want him to get nominated because they think, and I think, that he can be defeated by Biden. Now, nobody knows what Biden's health will be like, what his situation in general will be like. But if there were an election today between Biden and Trump, I think Biden would win that election. But, there's no question that it has bolstered his support among his base. But no prosecutor or judge should ever consider the political implications of an indictment or a conviction. That has to be done purely on the merits, on the facts. But we're moving away from that in our society. And, as Blackstone, the great British commentator, once said, better 10 guilty go free than 1 innocent be wrongly confined. That's why we put a heavy burden on the prosecution. But former Speaker Pelosi said that at the trial, Donald Trump will have an opportunity to prove his innocence. No, that's not the way the system works. The government has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt by admissible evidence that the defendant was guilty of real crimes. I don't think that's going to be possible, but I do think they might get a conviction because it's Manhattan and his name is Donald Trump.
Can charges be filed against the prosecutor? And because, will the prosecutor ever have to kind of explain themselves, or can this ever be prosecuted in jail? In the court of law, that they've gone out of doing this and they've gone out of their way to do this?
Well, there's an attempt to do it, but it's another manifestation of partisan politics. House committees, the House is now under the control of Republicans, are planning to subpoena Bragg and maybe ask him some questions. And they've already subpoenaed the former assistant who quit when Bragg decided not to bring the cases. So I think we may see some political accountability, but there's no legal accountability. But I want to emphasize again, the American Bar Association and state bars should pass an absolute rule prohibiting all people running for prosecutor from ever running on a campaign to get a particular individual. That is so antithetical to any system of justice. Go back 3,500 years. The Bible gives just 2 instructions to prosecutors and judges. The obvious one, don't take bribes. But the second one is in the original, lo takir panim, do not recognize faces. Hence the blindfold over the eyes of justice. Don't recognize faces. Don't go after people because of who they are. Go after them because of the crimes they've committed. And Bragg said, no, I'm going after Trump. And the Attorney General of New York says, I'm going after Trump. Now we'll figure out whether there's anything to go after him on, but I'm going after him. J. Edgar Hoover, the former head of the FBI, used to do that. He had a list. He had an enemies list. I was on that list. He cut off his relationships with Harvard University because I was a professor there. He wrote a letter to a justice of the Supreme Court saying he'll have nothing further to do with Alan Dershowitz because of who I defended. So, this kind of McCarthyism has come from the right for a long, long time, from some of the most evil people in American history, like J. Edgar Hoover, but now it's coming from decent people on the left who know no better. As Justice Brandeis once said, the greatest evil is when people of good intention, but who know nothing and don't realize it, do this kind of thing. And that's what's going on now.
Do you worry that the younger people today just don't have a sense of history? They don't know what McCarthyism was. They don't know what Hoover was doing. They've never seen the law co-opted that way, so they don't have a point of reference?
I think that's part of it. But I don't think they care. I don't think they care. For them, the ends justify the means. We need to do, and then A, B, C, D, the progressive elements, the left, the woke elements, many of which I agree with. But I don't agree with the means that they're prepared to use to achieve those ends. I want to achieve those ends through the ballot box. Look, I'm a strong supporter of a woman's right to choose abortion, but I wouldn't support going to the home of a justice who voted the other way and threatening to kill him. What I want to do is what's happening now. Democrats are winning elections when abortion is becoming the issue. We can win a lot of these issues legitimately at the polls, and we shouldn't be using illegitimate means like get Trump or get Kavanaugh, who's the justice of the Supreme Court. We shouldn't be targeting people like that. That's extremely dangerous. Today it's Trump. Tomorrow it's a Democrat. The day after tomorrow, it's your friend, and then it's you.
Yeah, that's what people need to understand. You talked about the search of Trump's office in Mar-a-Lago, and then you compared it to the fact that, you know, Hillary was never searched and there was nothing ever taken against her when she was accused, I think, of the emails, et cetera. Can you speak on that as well as kind of an overstepping of the law?
Yeah, look, I think the way they handled Hillary Clinton overstepped it. Although they didn't search and they didn't prosecute the former head of the FBI, James Comey, on the eve of the election, accused her of misconduct that may have had an impact on the election. But I don't want to prosecute Hillary Clinton. I don't want to prosecute Joe Biden or Hunter Biden unless there are real crimes that have come out. But there are Republicans now who are saying to Democrat DAs, look at Hunter Biden, go after him, go after Jill Biden, go after Joe Biden. No, that's not the way our system should work. I think we have to, if crimes are committed, let's find out who did the crimes, not go after people and find out if we can construct, manufacture, or concoct a crime against them. That's just not the right way.
Alan, you're a champion of free speech, and I wanted to get your thoughts on what you saw in the Twitter files that came out. And again, just as a point of reference, you know, back in April of 2020, I was struggling to speak freely on some of my tech platforms, specifically YouTube at the time. And they kind of took me off and started banning my videos and channels. And I was in a weird conundrum, Alan, because I stood up and said, wait a second, you're violating my First Amendment rights. Of course, I'm an American in Britain. And the government said, no, you signed a privacy policy for a private company, and so you have to do what they say. And then I said, well, no one's protecting my rights. I find out later via the Twitter files that my government was then going to the private company to violate my constitutional rights that way. And then, of course, nobody was to blame. That's the way I'm seeing this. What do you see in the Twitter files? Do you have any thoughts on what happened or what should have happened there?
Yeah, you know, I've written 52 books, so inevitably I've written a couple on that. I wrote a book called The Case Against the New Censorship, in which I deal with private censorship by private companies, which have had influence by the government. The government has put its thumb on the scales with Twitter and with others. I had a debate with Robert Kennedy Jr. Robert Kennedy Jr. and I disagree about vaccination policy. We agree about the environment. We're friends. But we had a pretty tough debate on vaccination policy. YouTube wrote and said, we're taking down the Kennedy part of the debate. We'll leave the Dershowitz part up because he advocated vaccination and masks. And I said, no, you can't do that. It was a debate. I don't want my one-sided views, so don't take any of them down. Well, they took us all down at that point. But then it went on Rumble and got, I don't know, 1 million views or something like that. So there is that censorship. Look, my book, Get Trump, is being censored now. It's been #1 on Amazon as a nonfiction adult book now for a couple of weeks. But you cannot buy it in independent bookstores in many cities because independent small bookstores, they claim to be independent, don't want to run a book entitled Get Trump. They don't want to be perceived as on Trump's side. So The problem of private censorship, sometimes with the thumb of the government, sometimes without the thumb of the government, has become very serious. It obviously infects academia, where professors and students are often chosen, and which means others are excluded based on their views. This is private universities, public universities. Berkeley, the University of California at Berkeley, a public university, 14 clubs at the law school have said that if you're a Zionist, which means if you believe in Israel's right to exist, period, doesn't mean you agree with Netanyahu or anything. If you're a Zionist, you cannot speak at our clubs, publicly funded clubs, at our clubs on any subject. So I can't speak on abortion. I can't speak on affirmative action. I forget about Israel. I can't speak on any subject because I'm a proud supporter of the right of the Jewish people to have a state of their own. And that's a public university. We see it happening in private universities, much harder to get to, but Stanford, private university. And so you put your finger right on it. Censorship is a problem. It's a greater problem when the government does it. And it's less of a problem when it's purely private, but it becomes a very serious problem when, without accountability, government agents influence what private internet companies actually do. And there's now a Supreme Court case that's going up about exemptions of companies. And Elon Musk is playing a very important role in this debate. He's provocative and he's not always right, but he's an important person. And I'm really glad that he ended up owning Twitter.
Me too. Were you surprised to find out the information from the Twitter files? You know, what
Yes.
we saw, I mean, the FBI and what looked like the CIA and Senate subcommittees and senators all trying to censor, pushing the Russian, case when Twitter was coming back saying there's no evidence of this Russian influence. Yeah, were you surprised to the extent of it all?
I was very surprised. And I was surprised with how open they were about it. They tried to hide it, but it became quite obvious fairly soon. But it's one of the hardest questions legally of the 21st century because, Twitter is a private company. It has the right under the First Amendment to decide not to have you and me on it, as long as they do it on the basis of legitimate considerations. And so it's so hard because they're claiming a First Amendment answer. Obviously, Madison would be turning over in his grave if he heard private companies claiming their right to censor under the First Amendment. It's not what the First Amendment was intended to protect, but it does. And so it's a very difficult case, but you should keep challenging it.
Will we see any prosecutions happening on the back of it, do you think?
No, I don't think so. I think this is a case which will probably result in both legislative and judicial resolution, but I don't see prosecutions coming out of it.
Do you think we'll ever see the YouTube files, the Facebook files, or anything like that?
Yes, I don't think in America or in Great Britain, secrets are kept for long. And, we have the WikiLeaks case coming up now. I was one of Julian Assange's lawyers. I met with him in London with his legal team before he was carted off to prison. And his case will establish a major precedence. I hope there's no case. I hope they drop the case. And I hope they allow him to go free. He's been a real hero of freedom of speech.
Will that case be tried in Supreme Court?
No, just a district court, probably in Virginia. It'll get all the way up to the Supreme Court at some point, but there's still a long way to go before Assange is brought before a court of justice. In the meantime, his health is deteriorating and his voice has been silenced, and yet he's presumed innocent.
Yeah. One thing I noticed, Alan, is that it seems that the purchase of Twitter by Elon Musk and even some of the actions of Spotify have kind of nudged some of these social companies to where I find that they're censoring less now. And I'm literally uploading videos that I had uploaded in 2020 that almost got me banned off the platforms, and they're allowing them to be up. And I believe some of these companies that are now reading the writing on the wall and thinking, we can't do what we used to do because either we're going to be found out or the tide is turning.
You're 100% right. There's no doubt that there is less of that, and partly as the result of people like you and me fighting it, and some government officials fighting it. You know, the law is much more important as it applies in practice than in theory. For example, there's been no change in the law regarding pornography in the United States, and I guess in England either. I don't know the situation as well in England. But today, adult pornography is pervasive on the internet. Anybody can get it at any point. The law hasn't changed, but 50 years ago, you couldn't see images like that. There was no internet, but you couldn't. People went to jail. I represented them. I represented Penthouse Magazine. I represented the film I Am Curious Yellow. I represented Harry Reams in other films. They were banned. People were sent to jail for that. Today, any kid, tragically, it's too bad, but almost anybody can just press a button and get adult pornography on the internet. So changes are brought about not only through the legal system, but through pressures and through practices. I went off YouTube for a while because of what they were doing to people like you and to people like Bobby Kennedy, and I went on Rumble, which does less censorship. Now I have a podcast called The Dersh Show, which anybody can get any part of the world. The Dersh Show, and it's both on Rumble and YouTube, and it regularly gets over 100,000 hits, and people want to see it. And I will not allow it to be censored. If it's censored, I'll move it to a different platform, but I will not submit to censorship.
While we're on the course of social media, you've called it out before when they go to fact check things and they go to not publish certain things. And I think you've noted that when they do that and then they allow other things, it kind of magnifies those things on the platform.
Oh, there's no question. And that has become a big issue involving anti-Semitism, where many of these platforms allow anti-Semitism at the same time that they won't allow other things, and that kind of legitimates anti-Semitism, which is why President Trump, to his credit, again, I didn't vote for him, but I helped him draft an executive agreement whereby universities that get federal money have to treat anti-Semitism exactly the same way they treat racism, sexism, homophobia, anti-Islam. You can't separate out one. And I think when the internet applies different standards, it creates an implication that it approves things that it doesn't take down. And that can send a dangerous message.
Yeah, on the internet now, you can not be racist against some groups, but you can be racist against other groups if they're considered privileged groups. And it becomes very messy right now.
Yeah, look, I love jokes. My family are joke-telling people. We love telling jokes. And there are certain groups you can tell jokes about. And there are other groups you can't tell jokes about. And of course, people can tell jokes about their own group. I mean, I love Jewish jokes, and half of the Jewish jokes you hear, are insulting. But we're telling them. And, the same thing is true with African Americans. They can use certain words that we can't use. But when it comes to the government, they can't have that double standard. The government has to have a single standard. And also, I think public, large internet companies have to have a single standard.
Alan, how could you explain to someone out there who looks at you and they say, how can a man like you not vote for Trump and yet help him draft legislation? How can a man like you work for the ACLU to protect freedom of speech, even though it's for, Nazi sympathizers? Right. It's something that I understand why you do it, and it's because of the law, but unfortunately, I think it's lost on most people. You must have this conversation sometimes with younger people. How do you explain to them how you can separate emotion from maybe law or from fact? How do you do that?
Well, I don't separate my emotions. My emotions are strong. When I see Nazis making speeches or communists making speeches, I get furious. But that I don't allow my emotions to interfere with my professional job of defending free speech. Both of my grandchildren are becoming doctors, and I've spoken to them about that. And you have a patient who's, you tell him take his shirt off and there's a swastika on his chest. What do? You treat him just like you treat somebody who would be having a Star of David on his shirt. You can't allow your emotions to interfere with your professional responsibilities. And that's what I try hard to do. My emotions are just as strong as they've ever been. I hate defending guilty people. I hate defending the free speech of racists or bigots or homophobic people. I myself hate all of those kinds of negatives, but I know that freedom of speech can't be for me, but not for thee. It has to be for the most hateful people in the world. In fact, the reasons behind free speech are to protect the most outrageous speech. Normal speech, you don't need a constitution to protect or a law to protect. You need the law to protect terrible speech. You need due process to protect terrible people, people who everybody wants to see in prison, like Jeffrey Epstein. That's when you need the law to protect them. And so, it's hard for me because people don't understand. They think somehow I like these people or I associate with them. In my personal life, I hate criminals. I hate, racists. I'm like most other people that way, but I have a job to do, and be like saying to a doctor, you should hate sick people. No, you have to treat them, and you have to treat them exactly the same as you would treat somebody from your own family.
How do you defend someone to the utmost of your abilities? And you're clearly very talented because you've had so much success. When you hate criminals or you don't agree with them, I mean, right. The subconscious plays such a big role in us. How do you stay focused?
Well, you need to stay focused. You need to keep reminding yourself. Look, and I have lines. People ask me all the time, if Hitler had called you in 1943, would you have defended him? And my answer is I would have asked to come to the place where he was sitting. I would have a conversation with him, and then I would strangle him with my bare hands. I would take out a gun and kill him. I would engage in an act of civil disobedience. But not as a lawyer. I would do that as a human being, and then I'd probably resign my bar because I couldn't continue to practice law. I couldn't defend Hitler, or I was asked to defend Radovan Karadzic. I met with him, and in the end decided, no, since there was continuing violence in that part of the country, I could not be part of that. So I have my own lines. I don't defend people who are in the business of committing crimes. I don't want to become a consigliere to a crime family. And it's interesting because, of course, Donald Trump and his people have asked me to defend him in this case now. And I've said no, because I have a rule. I don't defend somebody twice. I defend people only once. I don't want to become part of their pattern. I want to just be a defense lawyer. So I'm not going to defend Donald Trump, but I will defend his constitutional rights in excellent programs like yours and in the court of public opinion.
Alan, you're 84 years old and you're still mixing it up. You're publishing books on moment's notice. You're out there going head to head with media. How do you do it? I'd like to be doing what you're doing at that age. What gets you up in the morning? Tell me, what is it?
Well, I'd love to be able to just walk on the beach. I don't
believe you.
No, I actually enjoy. I go to the theater a lot. I listen to music. My wife and I try to walk 5 miles a day. If the world would only give me an opportunity to retire, I would, but I can't. I can't retire in the face of so much injustice and threats. People say I'm the last liberal standing, that everybody else has moved to the extreme right or the extreme left. And I am a liberal, civil libertarian. There are a bunch of us. I'm not the only one. But we can't lose me on that. And so maybe there'll come a time, maybe the good Lord will take away my strength. But my goal is to continue to fight this good fight as long as I can do so. I get up every morning raring to go. And my wife keeps saying, a little less, maybe don't get involved and take more care of your health and your family. I tried to balance, but, I was born to be a fighter. I was born to a family of people. My grandfather helped rescue people from the Holocaust in 1939. My father fought against anti-Semites on the street. He was a boxer. He was a good boxer. And it's part of my tradition. And I hope to be able to continue it for a long time. I don't make friends doing it, because the people on the right hate me because I'm not voting for Trump. The people on the left hate me because I'm defending Trump. And fortunately, I have a few in the middle in my family who continue to love me. So that keeps me going.
So not a lot of dinner party invitations these days.
The Trump diet, I've lost like 15 pounds because nobody invites me to dinner.
That's a great diet. Do you have other cases coming up? Do you have other plans for the rest of the year and the next year?
I always have other cases, mostly civil liberties cases, trying very hard to help the Israelis resolve.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.